Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind. Let's take a peek into today's leftist insanity, shall we? Well, it's been a while, I have to admit, we haven't heard much from the squad. But of course, as we know, it's only a matter of time till one of these far-left loons decides, today's the day I make an absolute fool of myself. It's an interesting way to get out of bed. You get up, move the sheets, put your feet down on the ground, slide them in some slippers, but instead of getting up and getting dressed as a professional, today's the day where you put the clown suit on. The curly hair, red nose, face makeup and all. Well, the circus is in town following today's clown show. Ilhan Omar decides that it's time to pick a fight with El Salvador. Interesting stuff, folks. Let's just say Nayib Bukele and his supporters weren't having any of it. Ilhan Omar continues to be an absolute embarrassment. Let me show you guys exactly what I mean by that. We got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. All right, folks, so I don't know too much about El Salvador, I have to admit. I don't know too much about Argentina. I don't really know much about South America. I know a lot of surface level things. I know a good amount about Mexico, but it's a very diverse place with a very complex history, so I couldn't tell you too much about El Salvador other than, the way that it's been perceived over the last few decades. If a couple years ago somebody just said El Salvador to me, I think the first thing that would come to mind is MS-13, drugs, gangs, horrible bloodshed across the nation. Well, nowadays, it seems as though that's changing, thanks to this man. This is Mr. Nayib Bukele, the president of El Salvador. He's a young man, only 42 years of age, and his leadership is helping turn the country around. He's considered a conservative, and so many people are touting the success of El Salvador and some of his policies as a conservative success story in a country that you might have disregarded at this point. And well, apparently, that's a big problem. Why is that a problem? That's a big problem with the members of the squad. Yes, this is serious. This is what members of Congress are focused on. Representative Ilhan Omar tweets, "I led members of Congress in sending a letter to Secretary Blinken urging action on threats to democracy in El Salvador. The State Department must review its relationship with El Salvador and defend democratic values. The Salvadoran people deserve free and fair elections without fear of repression." Ooh, spooky stuff. I guess Nayib Bukele is the El Salvadoran Donald Trump. Yeah, let me guess. So the next letter we're going to receive is warning of the tyrannical threat in Argentina following the rise of Javier Milei. What an absolute farce. These small conservative, anti-crime, pro-freedom guys, pro-business guys, they must be stopped. Secretary Blinken and the might of the US government should be used to keep them in line, according to Ilhan Omar. How ridiculous. The El Salvadorian president responded in kind. "We are honored to receive your attacks just days before our election. I would be very worried if we had your support. Thank you." And so here's why this thing is stupid. Read some little snippets about what's going on in El Salvador from theconversation.com. El Salvador voters set to trade democracy for promise of security. I guess El Salvador is ditching democracy in favor of a kingship, thanks to Nayib Bukele, based on the promise of security. Bukele's program to curb crime has led to an erosion of civil rights. Tens of thousands of people have been detained in a crackdown on organized crime, with those in prison subjected to overcrowding and alleged human rights abuses, including torture. Critics also point to the breakdown of democratic checks and balances across the government since Bukele first took office. He replaced members of the judiciary with allies, and he is running for president again despite constitutional law banning a second consecutive presidential term. So when Salvadorans cast their vote, they'll be faced with the question, is the short-term security that Bukele is offering worth the serious backslide on democracy taking place in El Salvador? Bukele's rollback of democratic norms has been relentless. As soon as his political party, Nuevas Ideas, won a supermajority in the legislature, he purged the Supreme Court of 5 justices and removed the Attorney General, actions that have allowed him to reinterpret articles of the Salvadoran constitution that ban him from running in this election. And so, yes, you are understanding this correctly. President Bukele, who won a landslide supermajority victory in the supposed democratic bastion known as El Salvador, well, he used that legislative supermajority to change laws which supposedly is ending democracy in El Salvador as we know it. What am I reading? What it seems to me, now correct me if I'm wrong, is that you have a president here, a young president who won a landslide victory, the likes of which hasn't been seen in the nation before. They were democratically elected into a supermajority. When you have a supermajority like this, you can make, I guess, constitutional amendments. You can clean house of all the corrupt career bureaucrats running your nation into the ground. Essentially, you can enact actual legitimate reforms, helping bring a country that is so freaking far are lost right now, back in order, back on track. My interpretation is that's what's going on in El Salvador with Nayib, and that supposedly is a threat to democracy and is deserving of sanctions from the Biden administration. Make it make sense. Please. What I'm seeing in El Salvador, if anything, is warming my heart. And once again, it proves that the Democrat Party is the party of criminals. These are the results of Mr. Nayib Bukele's reforms in the nation. They cleaned frickin' house with these MS-13 animals. Let's be real. These are the same people with the vicious reputation of slaughtering massive groups of people with frickin' machetes. Human rights violations. Give me a break. They're essentially calling him an anti-democratic despot, a tyrant. Yet he's democratically elected and leads his political opponents by not 10 points, 20 points, but upwards of 50 points. His approval rating in the aggregate is in the 90s. That is not a joke. Look at his approval rating and it continues to go up the longer he's in office. They're telling you that this guy is a threat to democracy in El Salvador, the democratically elected, most highly approved presidential candidate in modern history. I mean, please give me a frickin' break. People, this is the drop in violent crime since Nayib Bukele started taking action against these criminal gangs. That is a picture worth 10,000 words. El Salvador needs Nayib Bukele. To be completely honest with you, the United States needs someone like Nayib Bukele. But obviously simply because he's viewed as a successful conservative leader, leading government reforms in a massive war on crime and gangs, because he's a bastion of hope for what conservatism can do in South America, he's now public enemy number one of the pro-communist squad members in Congress. Ilhan Omar and her friends are now on the record siding with Hamas, supposed freedom fighters in Hamas, and they're on the record essentially calling for sanctions against a potential great conservative leader because his policies on crime actually work. Crazy stuff, folks. Not a good look. The entire internet is dunking on Ilhan Omar, and that's not the only freaking scandal she's facing, or I guess the only embarrassing moment of this week. She said some interesting things during a Somali event in her home city.
Waa laga yaabaa meelaha qaarkood inaan isku xagxagano laakiin haddii runtii ay imaato waxaan nahay dad isku tashto dad walaalo ah dad dhiig lah dad isku og inay Soomaali yihiin inay Muslim yihiin oo iyagana isku hiiliya dadka walaalahoodna u hiiliya.
Essentially telling her constituents that she isn't America first, she's Somalia first, and well, you could probably guess how that was perceived by people who don't live in her district. And this comes right after she praised and retweeted this guy, Mr. Mujahid Stafio Ibinis, I can't even pronounce it, the same guy talking about a great replacement happening in Minnesota, the same guy who tweets stuff like, there is power in numbers, breed like rats and establish global dominance, inshallah the 21st century will see the great rise of Islam, glory be to Allah. The same guy telling Europeans to go back to your country, saying that this land is Somali now. Soon Minnesota will be the first state to make Somali the official language. And so some interesting stuff there. To be honest, I'm more interested in that as a scandal than whatever's going on in El Salvador. And it seems like, for the most part, Twitter agrees. An absolutely embarrassing week of display from Ilhan Omar. Certainly not surprising in the slightest. That's what I got for you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to leave a like and possibly subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.